Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the LiveFlow webinar series, special edition today. As you can see, we have a very special guest, Danny Meyer, on board with us today. So yeah, excited to kick things off, but we will give it just a couple minutes here to make sure that everyone can join and that we get good numbers here. So we want to make sure we're going to ask your help here a little bit. If you could let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat, would be really great to make sure that it's working. Just see where we're spread out. I will say we've hit international the past, I want to say 8 months now. So let's hope that that streak can continue. I'm excited. Chicago, New York. All right. Boca. Okay, well, we have the continental geography covered of the continental US. Okay, there we go. Stuart, thank you for breaking the perfect. All right. We're international, everybody. We've achieved the goal. Amazing. Always great to see. All right. All right, team, we'll just give it a few more minutes here. Oh, see, we have quite a few LiveFlow customers on the call as well. Yeah, welcome from the LiveFlow community. If you're within it, we always like to see what you think the best thing about LiveFlow is as well. Good way to test the chat. First thought that comes to your head, let the people know. Okay. Dublin, awesome. Okay, team. We will go ahead and kick things off here. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, everybody, welcome to a very special edition of the LiveFlow webinar series. As you can see, we have a very special guest on board with us today, Danny Meyer, founder of Shake Shack, founder of Union Square Hospitality Group, truly a legend and a power player in the hospitality space overall. So yeah, really excited to dive in. Let me dive into a couple intros, and then I'll pass it off to Anita to take the ball a little further here. But yeah, very quickly, if you're not familiar with the full Danny Meyer story just yet, we're excited to get into it. In 1985, when Danny was just 27, started and opened his first restaurant, Union Square Café, very close to us here in New York City. This kicked off what has become one of the most prolific hospitality portfolios in recent times. Really believe that. It's truly impressive stuff. We have restaurants like Gramercy Tavern, The Modern, Milano, a lot of great stuff within New York. And then that's not to say creating one of the greatest burger icons of all time, that is Shake Shack. A lot of special stuff. So with that, really excited to dive into some lessons, some insights, and just some great stories from Danny and his experience in this space that I think will be really great for our audience today. Also have a very familiar face on here as well for the LiveFlow community, Anita Koimur, our LiveFlow co-founder and COO. Yeah, like I said, if you're within the LiveFlow community, you know her as our LiveFlow master, our spreadsheet master. She's understanding the numbers, the models. It's, as you all know, it's very impressive to have a conversation with her. So really excited to have these two minds together for this special edition of the LiveFlow webinar series. With that, Anita, I will hand the reins over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hi, Danny. So glad to have you. As Michael mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders, and for those who don't know what LiveFlow is all about, we help companies automate their finances with ease so that business owners have financial insights in real time. Now, it's not all about LiveFlow, it's about Danny today. So I'm very excited to have Danny as our guest. And as we all know, Danny's influence spreads way beyond the culinary world and goes way beyond just leadership. Danny is the leader across many fields. So I just wanted to have an honest conversation to learn more about yourself and ask a couple of questions about how you run your restaurant empire. So please welcome Danny. Danny, if you can just tell us how you started your very first restaurant, Union Square Café, when you were just 27, and what inspired you to change the course from being a lawyer and entering the industry of restaurants?
Great to be with you, and thanks, Anita. Thank you for all of you for tuning in. You know, that story it's getting older by the day. I was a poli-sci major in college and fascinated by politics. And, back in those days, if you're interested in politics, the only thing you ever thought about was, oh, I guess I got to be a lawyer. And it turned out that I took the LSATs, never applied to one law school. I know I would have been horrible as a lawyer. And I was just really, really lucky that the night before taking my LSATs, I was out for dinner with my aunt and uncle. And my uncle saw that I was in a pretty bad mood and he asked me what was wrong. And I complained that I had to take the LSATs the next morning. He said, well, of course you want to be a lawyer. And I said, I don't. And he got really mad and he said, you're going to be dead for a lot longer than you're going to be alive. Why wouldn't you do something that really connects with your passion? And I said, well, I don't know what else I could do. And he said, all I've ever heard you talk about your whole life is restaurants and cooking and food. And it still didn't dawn on me because it just didn't seem like a valid career choice. But thank goodness for that conversation. I was in the restaurant business probably a year and a half after that. I spent a bunch of time working in a restaurant in New York City, and then I went to France and Italy to learn how to cook. And I opened Union Square Café, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I just feel so lucky to be doing something that really aligns with my passion. And I hope that's what people on this call get to do as well. It's a privilege. We all work, we all have to work for one reason or another. But if you can be fortunate as I was to have a job, and it seems like you are, Anita, that really aligns with your gifts and what matters to you, then it truly doesn't feel like you're working. It's almost like a game, a team sport.
For sure. I can resonate with that a lot. And can you just tell us more how it went from restaurant number 1 to restaurant number 2 and then dozens of restaurants? And, I watched a couple of interviews with you and it looks like you were very hesitant because of your father's story to open multiple restaurants, but you actually had a Union Square Café first. And then, as far as I know, next to us in Madison Square Park, you decided to open Shake Shack, which was just a stand, which ended up being a global franchise. Can you talk through it a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to your question is it was really slow going. I never thought there was going to be a second restaurant. I opened Union Square Cafe, as you said, when I was 27, because it was like a mosquito bite that even though everyone said, don't do it, don't scratch it, I didn't have a choice. I was like, it's driving me crazy. And I think that's the case with a lot of entrepreneurs. You don't see what could go wrong. You only see what could go right. And so I opened Union Square Cafe, but it was never with the intent of having more than one restaurant. I just wanted to get it out of my system. And if it worked, that would be nice. If it didn't work, I'd go do something else. But I would have done it and I would have scratched the itch. And so it literally took almost a decade to open a second restaurant, Gramercy Tavern. And as you just alluded, a big part of the reason for that was that my late father was a really, really interesting entrepreneur. In fact, he gave me a lot of the gifts I have for loving travel and food and, wine and people. And he went bankrupt twice during his lifetime. And it was a really hard thing as his son and for all of us in the family to watch that happen. That's your hero. And, all of a sudden he's out of money. And I didn't really understand business all that well, but what I did understand was that it seemed to me every time he went bankrupt, it was because he was expanding his business. And so I said to myself, I'm just never going to expand and then I'll never go bankrupt. And he died. He actually died before I opened Gramercy Tavern, before I opened my second restaurant. And in a weird way, that was the license that I needed to say, okay, two things. You're not your dad. And number two, there's a whole lot of businesses in the history of the world that have expanded without going bankrupt. And I took a deeper dive to think about, well, what had I learned from him? And a big part of it was that he it wasn't expansion per se. It was that he was not surrounding himself with people who complemented his skills, as well as his weaknesses. And so that was a commitment that I made to myself, is that I would always try to hire people who could do all the stuff I did, or at least a big part of it, as well or better than I could. I wanted to surround myself with people I could learn from. And I think I've done that. And I'm really proud of our team. I'm proud of the alumni who have worked at this company, who have gone on to do great things on their own outside of this company. And so anyway, it never was my dream to have more than one restaurant, but then there were two, Gramercy Tavern and Union Square Cafe. And we had what I used to call a sibling revelry between the two. They were both kind of duking it out every single year with the Zagat survey to see who could be New York's favorite restaurant. And there were probably 7 consecutive years where either Union Square Cafe or Gramercy Tavern was 1 or 2 as New York's favorite restaurants. And, part of that sibling revelry was fun, but some of it wasn't. And then I didn't wait that long for number 3 and 4. It was 11 Madison Park and Tabla. And then all of a sudden, Blue Smoke, The Modern, Shake Shack, Myelino, and they just kind of started coming a little bit more quickly.
What sparked those restaurants? They're all quite different if you look at them.
Well, if I were,
how did it happen?
I'm a frustrated musician and a frustrated novelist. If I could write books that quickly, I would. If I could write songs that quickly, I would. I just looked at restaurants almost as my creative outlet, which is, here's a chance to open a place that if only it existed, would be one of my favorite restaurants anywhere. And a lot of innovation, I think, for any of us comes from your own life experiences. I promise you, Anita, there's nothing in any of our restaurants that we made up from scratch. Nothing. Not the design, not the menu, not the waiters' uniforms. It's kind of like writing a song. There's 8 notes in the octave plus 5 majors and minors. And out of that, there's an unlimited number of songs that can be written. And it's the same thing in our business. It's like I'm remembering experiences that I've had through my whole life, and I put them in my memory bank and my heart and my brain and my file cabinet. And I think innovation is being able to connect those dots at a time that makes them all feel, and then combine them in a way that makes them all feel fresh. And I never wanted to do the same thing over. As a matter of fact, it took 5 years to open a second Shake Shack. 5 years to open our second Shake Shack, because I was afraid that I would be bored doing the same thing more than once. And somebody fortunately helped explain to me that there can be great creativity in replication. There is so much creativity in Shake Shack. Even though it's the same thing, it's not. It's never the same thing. And, there's different things you learn about real estate, different things you learn about the menu, purchasing. And then, of course, Shake Shack, after 5 years, started growing. Now there's about 540 in about 20 different countries in the world. So it's been a fun ride.
Right. But still you decided not to open more franchises, right? Apart from Shake Shack. So you continue your creative journey and try to open brand new restaurants that are not like others.
Well, not exactly. Not exactly. First of all, Shake Shack's not a franchise. We own all the Shake Shacks domestically. Internationally, we always have a license partner, which is close to being a franchise, but it's a different legal organization, being a license partner. But we always have a license partner internationally because we know what we don't know internationally. We don't know the same things a local company would know about real estate, licensing, permitting, purchasing, supply chain, talent acquisition, public relations, local preferences for food, et cetera. So it's been a really good thing to have a local partner in each case. With respect to your first question, I will say that Shake Shack has been so much fun that we've tried actually on several occasions to come up with an idea that could potentially scale. But the best ones happen when you're not trying. So Daily Provisions and Shake Shack were both kind of accidents. Shake Shack was never, I didn't wake up one morning saying, let's have a great place for burgers and shakes and fries. It was, I wanted to take care of Madison Square Park and wanted to do something nice for the park, and actually gifted this building to the park so the park would become our landlord. And so that a percentage of our sales would go back into the park with every purchase. And it worked. The park probably gets close to $1 million a year in rent, which goes right back into keeping it beautiful and safe. And we got a nice business out of the deal, but that was it. And then with respect to Daily Provisions, where we just opened our 6th here in New York City, same thing. That was a mistake. It was my favorite kind of mistake. We desperately wanted to find a new location for Union Square Café, which had lost its lease after 30 years. And the site that we found happened to be adjacent to another space, which was an old barbecue restaurant. And the landlord said, if you want either of them, you have to take both of them. And so we said, okay, it's actually good because we need more kitchen space for the Union Square Cafe, but now we're left with this little box. We had to do something with it. And so I said, well, let's give a gift to the neighborhood. I live near here. I work in this neighborhood. I want a better cup of coffee, and I want a really good roast chicken that I can bring home at night. And I want a good bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich and a good salad for lunch. Boom, that became Daily Provisions. And
Incredible how you create this out of thin air.
people are falling in
Just
love
like
with
that.
it. It's really cool. So we'll do both, Anita. We'll, every couple of years we'll open a full service restaurant. Most recent one is Chisiamo here in the city. And we'll do those occasionally, but they're hard, and they take all kinds of time to dream it up, design it, raise the money, build it, hire for it, and then build your audience.
Yeah, I want to learn more about it. So actually, I spent the weekend touring your restaurants. Daily Provisions, Shake Shack, and Chisiamo was last night, which was fantastic, I have to say. And one thing that is very consistent across all of them, that people are actually very happy there. I think every employee was extremely welcoming and happy to see us. Can you please tell us a little bit more how you scale the culture, and maybe go a little bit deeper into how it all starts? How do you recruit people? How do you train people? How do you develop people? I think it's really important because as far as I know, today we have people joining from various countries that more or less all work within the service industry. So we have accountants from owners, we have restaurant owners, hotel owners. And I think it's very relevant to everyone here to learn how to provide the best service so that you always have loyal customers. And I believe that comes from really happy employees. Can you tell us more? What is your philosophy? How do you just follow all of the steps to make people really happy at work and provide the best services?
Well, you're asking probably the single most important question, which is, how do you scale culture? How do you, and I'm fascinated by that. I will say that's probably the thing that gets me most excited about going to work every day. It's one of the hardest things we can do, which is to scale a feeling. How does it feel to work there? How does it feel to do business with that place? How does it feel to be a customer of that place? How does it feel when you get one of those places, you wake up one morning and you go, oh my gosh, we're about to get a blah, blah, blah restaurant right next to our apartment. I want those all to be really, really good feelings. And it really starts with intention. It took me a long time to even understand what the word culture means. Everybody uses it, but what is culture? Well, culture, I've thought about this word a lot, and it means so many different things. First of all, at its most basic, it's the way we do things around here is our culture. Now, you don't have to work to have a culture. My next door neighbors growing up in St. Louis had a culture. I don't think they worked at it. The dad would screech in the driveway every afternoon after work at 5 o'clock, 5:02, make himself a drink, and then have an argument, and then the dog would eat someone's homework, and then blah, blah, blah. That was a culture. That's how they did things around here. Nice people, but you do have to work to have an intentional culture. And I think you really have to work to have an intentional and uplifting culture, which is really what we try to do. And let's go further into the word culture. Here's a great definition I got from, I was touring UCLA, the college. And it turns out they have, some of you on this call may know this, they have an athletic Hall of Fame there. And they have more championships than any university I've ever seen. Every single sport, men's sports, women's sports. And someone in the crowd, when I was getting this tour, asked the athletic director, what do you attribute all this success to? And of course, his answer was, it's our culture. Whereupon the question was, what do you mean when you say culture? And he says, it's a really hard word to define, but it's a whole lot like a newborn baby. You better keep your eyes on it 24/7. You better feed it 5 times a day. And the minute it makes a mess, you better clean it up immediately. That's what he had to say about culture. I'll take it a step further. I've learned very, very profoundly. Early in my career, I was really, really good at catching people doing things right. And I thought that's all it takes. Just constantly catch people doing things right. And what I learned is that if you don't also hold people accountable for when they're not doing the right thing, then your culture is going to be undermined. So I finally figured out that culture in our case is the sum of all of the wanted behaviors that we celebrate, minus all of the unwanted behaviors that we tolerate. And that will be our culture. And so it's incumbent upon me with our culture to be really, really clear about what behaviors we expect of you, and to make sure everyone in the organization knows that.
How do you make it clear? How like if I talk to anyone at your restaurant, I assume they know what they have in mind, like about culture, right?
I would hope so.
How do you make it clear?
I'll tell you right now that no matter how many times we say it, it's not enough, because any business has turnover, and every time you think you've said it to everybody, you either haven't said it well enough or you haven't said it to everybody. So we make it clear in a lot of ways. We do not have any group meeting that starts without putting them up on the wall. Here's the 5 expected behaviors. By the way, I will share that up until a couple of years ago, we had 4 family values, and we replaced 4 family values with 5 expected behaviors. And you may say, what's the difference between, except for one? The difference is that we were unwittingly sending out a message that it's a family. It's not a family, it's a business. I would like it to feel like the good parts, not the dysfunctional parts of family, but I'd like it to feel positive when you work in one of our restaurants or in our home office, that you feel a sense of camaraderie that is family-like. But it was sending an unfair and dishonest message to say family values, because sometimes you have to fire people, and you don't fire a family member. So we changed that. We also changed the word values to behaviors, because it's really hard to hold someone else accountable for my values, but I can hold someone accountable for expected behaviors. So it's made a big sea change of a difference. And I really believe that for any organization, language is the mortar between the bricks of culture, and it's the way that you scale culture. It's having a common language. It doesn't mean that the culture is not to be confused with a cult. We want to hire people who come from very different walks of life, who have a different mindset, but I do want to hire people who have a similar heart set. I do want to hire people who care that their actions are going to make people feel better. And I hope you would feel that when you came to this very diverse group of restaurants that you went to over the weekend. That the people working there, I would really hope, are the kind of people whose emotional skills are such that they are happier themselves when they make you feel better. And so that's the key thing we've learned, is that being very intentional about the emotional skills set that you're looking for when you hire is hugely, hugely important.
That's fantastic. And honestly, I ask this question myself every day. How do we find those people, right? Because we also serve our customers, and it's very important to provide the best service. So I'm curious if you can share, are there any certain ways you can recommend when interviewing candidates? Anything specific, like what you see in people when you say, okay, this person is emotionally perfect for us, let's put it this way. Like we want
Do you
to
say
hire them.
emotionally perfect?
Yeah, maybe.
Starting
Not
with
sure.
starting with me, no one's emotionally perfect.
Well, maybe
I
I can
think
phrase it differently, like you said, right? So emotionally, you hire based on that, right? So it seems like it's one of the like core behaviors, but I don't quite understand how to measure it. Can you talk more about it?
so. The emotional skills that make up someone who's got what we call having a high HQ, high hospitality quotient. Um, it's very, very basic. And I think we've spent a lot of time internally thinking about how do we ask the right questions. So I'll give you an example. So with an emotional skill, as opposed to a technical skill might be, how do I make the pasta? And the chef can actually work on you to make it better tomorrow. Stop cooking it, use this amount of salt in the boiling water, stop cooking when the pasta is al dente or just before al dente. They can teach you the whole thing. It's a technical skill. Some people pick it up overnight. Some people may take a little longer, but you can teach it. An emotional skill, I believe, is something that comes baked into people by the time we meet them. Maybe they got it through nature, maybe they got it through nurture, but these are skills that are real, but it's really, really hard for us to teach. What we can do is to be very explicit about which emotional skills we're looking for at a high level. And when we see them, we can celebrate them. We can shine the light on them, and be very, very clear with people. That's why you got hired. So that absent those skills down the road, because we make mistakes. So I'll tell you what the 6 emotional skills we look for all the time at a very high level are: kind optimism, curiosity, work ethic, empathy, self-awareness, and integrity. And so, for example, you could be the world's best grill cook, and if you're not kind, or you're not curious, or you don't have a good work ethic, or you're not empathetic, it doesn't matter to you how other people feel, or you don't have integrity, or you're not self-aware, you shouldn't get the job here. And I will tell you that when we get those things right, and we have a whole team who is not only really good at what they do, which we call 49% of the game, but they're really good at who they are, which is 51% of the game. We have what we call a 100% employee. And we also have a really good framework for when things are not going well to talk about those things. It's not a surprise if and we have questions during the interview process that really help us to determine, where somebody is. I would never say to somebody, are you self-aware? Oh, yes, of course I am, but I might ask somebody a question like, what's the greatest misperception other people have about you? And that answer that they give me is going to be very, very revealing about their own self-awareness. For example, you cannot answer that question, what's the greatest misperception other people have about you, if you, A, don't have a sense of who you really are, and B, if you don't have a sense of what you're putting out there. And I think a lot of us are misunderstood about one thing or another. It doesn't I'm not bad. There's a lot of things people misperceive about me. But I want to know that someone's aware. And so that's the kind of question I'll ask. I wouldn't say, are you empathetic? Oh, yes, of course I'm empathetic. But I might say, talk about a time you used your natural empathy in your last job. And if someone looks at you like you're from Mars, that's telling you something. But on the other hand, you get some great stories from people about things they did for a coworker, things they did for a customer. And so we're really, really intentional about it. You know, if I can just go off on a little tangent, I love wine. I love teaching about wine, love drinking it, selling it, sharing it. But I also think that winemakers are a lot like we are as organization leaders. Think about it for a minute. The best wineries or chateaus or whatever you want to call them, vineyards in the world are very, very reliant on a lot of different things, including things they cannot control. They cannot control how much rain they get, or did they get hail early in the season, or when was it warm, when did it get cold, etc. We cannot control a lot of things either. We can't control the economy. We can't control the weather. We can't control if there's, some big convention in town that canceled. There's all kinds of things that are out of our control. That's our version of the vintage. But here's what a winemaker knows to do. Number one is they have to take great care of their soil. That's their culture, because they can get the best grapes in the world. But if the soil in which they're planting those grapes is not healthy, it doesn't matter. Right? So they're responsible for taking care of their soil. We're responsible for taking care of our culture, feeding it. Two, they're responsible for picking the best grapes in the world for that soil. So if I'm in Burgundy, I want to pick the best Chardonnay grapes, but they don't grow Sauvignon Blanc in Burgundy. They don't grow, Albarino in Burgundy. They grow Chardonnay there. So they've got to get the best Chardonnay for that vineyard. Next thing they have to do is, now they got good soil, they got good grapes. Those are our people. We got to pick the best people, the right people for this soil, the right people for this culture. Then you got to train the vines. That's what a winemaker does. If they don't train the vines, you don't get the maximum amount of sun to hit those vines. We have to train our people. They can't just let them grow unruly all over the place. And then you got to prune the vines. If you leave every grape cluster on there, you're not going to get the best sun. You're not going to get the most sun to the best. So sometimes we have to lose people from our team, and on it goes. And then finally you get to the point where you got to make the wine and be really, really selective about how you make it. So what this all comes down to is what I hope for our organization, which is there's no winemaker in the world who makes their best wine every single vintage, because there's some things out of their control, but they should make the best wine of that vintage by making sure their soil is healthy, the grapes are healthy, the selection
The inputs are there, essentially.
all the above. And that's really what we try to do. And for that reason, I'd like to feel like if you come to any of our restaurants, you can say they have their thumbprint on that place. I can feel that it's a Union Square Hospitality Group restaurant.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, it did feel so. Thank you so much for this analogy. I really imagined the whole process, and it resonates a lot with me. I wanted to ask you something that was submitted as one of the questions ahead of this webinar. So someone in the audience is running an accounting firm that works with restaurants, specifically in New York City. And the question was around the key financial metrics that you prioritize when understanding the health and success of your restaurants. What do you look at? What is important to you?
There's one. I mean, there's a lot, but if this one is healthy, we can always figure it out. And that is, we call it cover count, which is the number of guests that actually ate in the restaurant. And so it depends on the business. At Shake Shack, we call it transaction count, because if you go to Shake Shack, I don't know if you were ordering for 3 people or 4 people. If you come to one of our full service restaurants, I know you're a table of 3. So with our full service restaurants, I'm looking at cover counts. With Shake Shack, I'm looking at transaction counts. That is the entire story. If that is healthy and it's growing day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year, you've got a healthy, robust business. If that's declining, that is the most important thing to look at. Why? Because we're all running for office every single day. And if fewer people are voting for our product at the price we're charging in any corresponding period of time, that is a sure sign for me of a lack of health. And I've seen the story too many times where, you raise your prices because of inflation or whatever it happens to be, your cover counts decline, and then you try to raise your prices to get yourself out of it. It's the worst form of a vicious cycle. Whereas if you see that more people in each successive period want to buy your product, you can figure out the business stuff almost always after that. But declining interest in paying what you're charging for your product, it begins and ends there as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I expected to hear revenue or something like that. But yeah, it's great you brought up something different. Thank you so much.
Well, it
all right.
definitely it connects to revenue for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And something around like average order value or transaction or something like that, but it's covered.
That connects as well, but it all starts with the health of the demand.
Got it. Super. Okay. Thank you so much for this one. And in terms of scaling your business, can you please talk about probably the biggest mistakes and the biggest lessons that you've learned on the way?
I probably already made about 48 today. So let me go back in time a little bit. I always feel like the biggest mistake, the 2 biggest mistakes I think I make are all combined to one heading, which is waiting too long and having too much patience with things that are not working, or people that are not working, or businesses that are not working. Because I feel like I'm an optimist for sure, and I think that's the case with a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, my whole philosophy is actually what could possibly go right, not what could possibly go wrong. And I never met a challenge that I didn't feel like that would be a fun challenge to overcome. And, I've got a great team of people to do it with. But I think that, one of my early big mistakes was hanging in with a restaurant called Tabla, which was open for almost 13 years, but probably should not have been opened. Definitely kept it going for 2 years longer than I should have. And I think that the mistake was a fear of laying people off, when in fact I was doing the opposite by keeping people on for 2 years too long in a business that was failing. Meant that nobody was getting a raise, nobody was getting a promotion. And the most unfair thing I could do was actually to keep them on. So I think I've learned how crucially important it is, if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur or business person, period, you got to try a lot of things, and they're not all going to work forever. And by the way, 13 years is not a bad run for a restaurant. I wouldn't call it a failure. It just wasn't forever. But guess what? I'm not forever. None of us is forever. And I feel like the old adage, fail fast, is a really important one. And I really had to learn that lesson the hard way. And I've had to learn that with people. Sometimes I hang in there with people on our team because I believe in the best in people. And if you have somebody who you can get over the hump in terms of their technical skills, it's worth having been loyal, I think, because, I think that you get some of the most loyal employees ever when they saw that you were willing to keep betting on them. But I've hung in there with people who actually didn't have the emotional skills, and they're just never going to change. And sometimes I historically have been great at making excuses for that, saying, oh, if we lose Johnny, we're going to lose the absolute best accountant we've ever had on our team. Well, guess what? That best accountant is not good for your culture. You can't make excuses for that. So all of the biggest mistakes I've made tend to fall into the category, I think, of being too patient where my gut actually knew the right answer.
So would it be right to think that we need to trust our guts and say like, okay, if you feel, like literally feel internally that this is about the right time for, letting someone go, changing things around, then this should be it? Or what is the methodology or the mental framework that you follow? Or it's just the gut feeling as it is?
I think the best framework is listening, because usually by the time I get there, there's 25 people on the team who already knew. And it meant that I wasn't being a very good listener.
Yeah.
How many times do you make a change like that? Whether it's, and there's so many of them, it's not just people who work for us. Sometimes it's a supplier we're doing business with, where, loyalty is a good thing until it's not. And sometimes my loyalty confuses me. And I just hang in there too long. But by the time I get there, usually there's at least 25 people who are like, about time, Danny, when were you going to make that decision? Which is why I deputize really important decisions to much smarter people than I am on our team.
All right. On this note, I would love to open the floor for the questions that we have here, and I see we have a lot. I'll see if we covered that already, but let me localize this one. How did you set up your head office structure for scale? What do you believe the tipping point or correct ratio of people to venues is? Well, that's an interesting part of the question.
It's very, I wish I could answer that one. It's very specific to the business. So some of our businesses are much more people intensive than others. I think I know what the person is driving at, but maybe not, but I'll answer it my own way anyway. Which is that we have a support function. Our home office exists for the purpose of supporting our operating businesses, mostly restaurants, in terms of the things you would expect: finance, purchasing, design, concept development, human resources, public relations, marketing, that kind of thing. And the question is that I think about all the time is, when is it not enough support, and when is it too much support? And I don't think we've ever gotten it exactly right. But it's a really hard question to answer in a general way. I think you really need to be more specific to the business. I will say that taking a business like Daily Provisions, which, as I said, just opened its 6th restaurant about 2 weeks ago, we learned a lot of lessons from Shake Shack, which is that if you're too slow to hire and train and install management at a certain level, and then you try to grow, you're always going to be playing catch up. If you get really strong managers in the system, I'd rather get too many too soon at this point, so that when we are ready to grow, we not only have those managers, but they've been so successful that they've trained a number 2 and a number 3. And I think if you want to know the health of an organization, look at the number 2s and 3s, because that's the opportunity to grow.
Let's move on to the next question. I think that's a very, very good question. I think at the beginning you mentioned that you became really great at hiring the people who would complement your skill set. So the question is, how did you find those people? And have you had to fire a lot of people to find the right ones?
Well, I think you first have to know your own skill set. I knew from the very beginning a lot of things I was just not that great at, but that I still needed. I mean, here's the most obvious. I thought I was gonna be the chef of my first restaurant. I'm a really good home cook, but I'm not that. So that was an easy one. Then the next thing is, I knew we needed to have a great bookkeeper. This goes back to the early days of Union Square Cafe, because it's not my thing. On the other hand, I knew that it was really easy for me to welcome people to the restaurant and be on the front door. And I just think that almost, I don't know if I do this every day of my career, but I do it really frequently. It's almost like brushing your teeth or mowing the lawn. You sweep through the whole organization and say, what are like really take inventory of how you're spending your time. And we get comfortable. I get comfortable doing all this stuff just like I did it yesterday. But the fact is, time is the greatest resource we have. And I promise you that almost every single time I really get focused on this, I find that there's things I'm doing that someone else could do at least as well or better than I can. And the minute I see that, it's time for me to deputize someone else to do that. And so at this point in my career, I should be doing fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer things, but only those things that uniquely line up with my gifts. And if I don't do that, that means that as we grow, we did not get better. If I do that, not only did we get better as we grew, because I found someone who could do the stuff I used to do better than I can, but if I'm focusing more of my time on the decreasing number of things that uniquely line up with my gifts, that should help us from my leadership perspective as well.
Perfect. All right. So another question here: how do you balance long-term sustainability with short-term profitability, especially in hospitality?
I mean, that's another really amazing question. I think that the long-term stuff is your values, that they should just never change no matter what. And I think that they become the compass for how you make choices. Business is just a series of problems to solve and choices to make. I wish I could make it more complicated than that. And you know, you obviously have to do the short-term things to pay the bills, but I really think that, you know, we have this expression, is it today dollars, tomorrow dollars, or never dollars? And we try really hard not to make never dollar decisions, but I don't have any problem making tomorrow dollar decisions, which is, you know, it could be an act of generosity with one of our guests. It could be buying somebody's dinner who's been to your restaurant, you know, 10 times in the last month. Buy them their 11th dinner. That's not today dollars, but it sure is tomorrow dollars. It's a very, very good question, and I'd love to meet this person who asked it, because we could have a good conversation. But it's really important, I think, to balance those things, because you got to pay the rent, and you can't pay the rent with tomorrow dollars, but you can pay tomorrow's rent with tomorrow dollars. And so it's hitting that balance the right way is really important.
I think pretty much on the same note, and probably ties back to the question and the answer you provided just a little bit earlier. So Stuart is asking, how do you prioritize your time when running multiple businesses? And I guess Stuart is referring to some example. One venue has poor sales, other maybe has a people problem, other perhaps needs service issues. How do you split your time and focus? This is what I struggle with as an operations manager. I have too many spinning plates. Yeah.
I think it's really important to just acknowledge that I am not a one-man act. We have an amazing team here. And it's really, do we have the right span of accountability and leadership per business? So none of us can succeed if we're a whirling dervish, going from this, putting out that fire to putting out this fire, putting out that fire. I do the best job I can to know where I'm needed and where can I actually add value. Where is the restaurant that needs to be seen by me? Where's the restaurant that I need to see? Where's the restaurant whose morale is low? Where's the restaurant that is doing great and needs and deserves a big pat on the back? And by the way, I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I think I made early in my career was actually to spend more time with the problems and not enough time with the things that were going really, really well. And I think I'll give you a quick example of that. We all have employees on our team who just wake up on the right side of the bed every single day. And it's really easy to take them for granted if you're not careful. And that's not a good thing. They need to be celebrated, shine the light on them, because guess what? Where we shine our light as leaders is where the gravitational pull of the whole organization will go. And if I'm shining too much of my light on the problems, or the weeds, the flowers are going to all turn in that direction. That's what sunflowers do. They go where the light is. So it's not that I can just stick my head in the sand when we have a problem business, but it's really important that I balance that with lots and lots of celebration of the people and businesses that are doing great. But again, we have specialists. I'm very, very blessed to have an incredible team of people. And if it's a financial problem, I'm not the first guy that we should be sending in. If it's a revenue problem, I care deeply, but I'm not the first guy people need to do their job. And then I need to be at the appropriate meetings and ask the appropriate kind of questions to make sure that people are, provoked to come up with good solutions to this particular business problem.
So it sounds like we need to find the right people first and then delegate, and don't be the bottleneck for all sorts of problems. Another question. When thinking about talent development, do you think it's pointless to try and develop someone's weaknesses versus just making their strength better and better? As an example, Danny, you probably have become a great cook, but you realized you wasn't, well, I guess it repeats what you just said. It wasn't your core strength, so you decided to hire yourself out. Exactly what you just said. But I think it just repeats the point.
So getting back to the question then, the question is, do you think it's, just repeat the first part of that, if you don't mind?
Yes. When thinking about talent development, do you think it's pointless to try develop someone's weaknesses versus developing their strength and making those better and better? So would you try to make them, rounded and be able to cover multiple parts of the business, or just focus on their strength and become better?
I think we've learned that it's both, but we've also learned that there's kind of two different ways to think about it. When someone's having a performance issue, one of the things we will ask is it a can't or a won't? Is it that they just don't know how to do it? Or it's that they could do it, they just don't have the right attitude, or they just, they're just not cut out to be part of this team. And they're very different skill sets. It gets back to the 49 and 51 that I was talking about before. So on the 49% technical skill stuff, we will be a little bit more patient with somebody. If it's a can't, we will coach them and do everything we can to help them over the hump, albeit with a time frame to that. And by the way, if it's someone who can do something and they will do something, I want to celebrate that like crazy, just like I was saying. If it's I can do it, but I won't do it, like I've got a bad attitude, that's going to be a shorter time period by a lot. I don't really know how to coach someone who won't. I can put the fire under their rear end and say, you know, you're way too good at your job to be, but there's something holding you back that just doesn't make it seem like this is the right place for you to be. You're like a beautiful jigsaw piece that does not fit in this puzzle. And we can keep trying to fit you in here, but it's not going to be good for the piece, and it's not going to be good for the puzzle because you just don't fit. Because you don't seem to want to do stuff the way we do stuff around here. So big difference between can and can't, and will and won't. And I'll tell you right now that I'll spend a lot less time with someone who won't than I will with someone who will. And a lot less time, and probably more time with someone who can't than most people will. But if they can't get to the can part, we got to cut bait. Because here's the thing, as the leader of our culture, if I say that this organization is really about two things, excellence and hospitality, right? And we keep people on the team who cannot be excellent or cannot be hospitable, then I'm only undermining every single thing I say about our culture.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Another question on the culture part. What advice would you give to a business that is trying to reinvigorate culture in which culture was not an intentional focus in the past? Good question.
Yeah. And we've been there before in various ones of our business. It's just really, it's really important to use your words like we used to tell our kids when they were growing up. You've got to be really clear with people how we expect people to do things around here. And let me make something really clear. Culture is very different than core values. One of the things I used to hear as we were growing our business that used to just cut into me like this was when people would say, it seems like the culture is changing around here. And I hated that. I felt like I was letting everybody down. And now basically what I say is, you're darn right it's changing around here because we're growing. Of course we do things differently now. If someone said your values have changed, I should be really upset. If my core values have changed, the purpose for why we're in business has changed, I should be upset. But the culture, how we do things, needs to change. And so to the question, I think I would say, I've done this many times, is get up in front of the whole group and have a talk and then put it in writing and say, you know what? We've taken a look at ourselves in the mirror and we're better than this. And I need to be really clear with you on the behaviors we now expect of one another and that we will hold each other accountable for. And every business needs to have their own behaviors, expected behaviors. I wouldn't have more than 4 to 6 of them because I don't think it's fair to expect anyone to remember more than that. But I think it's a really good way to go. And it's really been helpful in my business to name what those behaviors are. And to, you know, as someone once told me, but this was from an English professor, it's true of business just like it is of writing. And the professor said, everything has already been said, but not everything has been said superbly. And even if it had been, everything must be said freshly over and over again. And what I love about that is that I feel like until my whole team is rolling their eyes saying, we've heard that too many times, we get it, we're on it, don't tell us again, which will never happen. But until that happens, I haven't said it freshly over and over or as well as it could be said. And it can't just be me. It's got to be everybody. Culture is everybody's job. It's not one person's job.
That's fantastic. We have so many questions, but unfortunately, we don't have the time to answer them all. Actually, we're up, and I'd love to ask you one last thing before we wrap up completely. So for those who are just breaking into the restaurant industry and trying to make things work, what would be your advice to ensure long-term success? I think I know the answer based on the conversation we've just had, but I'll give it over to you.
Boy, that's one answer for that. I think humility, which is understanding that I know it's a hackneyed expression, but we're only as good as the last meal we served, and we're only as good as the last transaction we had with the last guest in our restaurants. And they don't all go well. So I think that if this business I would say if all business doesn't teach you about humility, which is look at each day as an opportunity to honor the work you did yesterday, even though you made mistakes, but just honor it. Take a minute and say, we didn't go to work hoping to suck. We did the best we could. But then look at each day as an opportunity to do it a little bit better today. So it's really what we try to do is honor yesterday, mistakes and all, figure out how we could do it a little bit better. And that all adds up to me to humility, which is let's be learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the fantastic, insightful conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
And again, thanks to all of you for tuning in. I'm grateful.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Anita, for an incredible session. Yeah, another one in the books, people. Thank you so much for this special edition. I hope everyone found it as insightful as we all did here in the office. Really incredible stuff. Thank you, Danny, so much. Thank you, Anita. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.